It's like the start of a bad joke, right? Two anthropologists and an ex-hockey player get in a room and try to create a culture of innovation. What bad stuff can happen from that, right?
So, let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?
Hey everybody, it's Dave. I'm back with another cool episode, this time with Mark Bidwell and Heidi. I'll introduce them in just a minute, but today we're going to talk about how you create innovation leadership in a corporation. It's what I do for a living, actually, and it's very, very difficult. And I first met Mark last year as I was trying to release Winome as a product together with Mickey Ruprecht. And Mark approached us and said, hey, I've seen that you're actually trying to lead innovation. Can you tell me about your personal story? And I found that so inspiring. So you want to kind of say where you came from and how we got here today?
Yeah, so Dave, I'm Mark Bidwell. 20 years in the corporate world, just come out of that, having been an innovator, an entrepreneur, and ending up as, I call myself an accidental executive running a $2 billion business unit for Syngenta here in Switzerland. Yep. And I'm father, 3 kids, and based in Basel, up the road from here.
Based in Basel. So kind of, what was Syngenta? Crop protection?
Crop protection, yeah, essentially. Agribusiness.
Right. So people love to hate it, but you were actually working in a very productive sector of industry.
Yeah, I mean,
Basel is known for this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, there are 3 types of work one can do in life. You can cure people, you can feed people, and you can educate people, right? Syngenta is in the business of feeding people. Basel also very well known for curing people, the big pharmaceutical industry. And then this business that we're setting up here, which we're going to talk about today, the innovation ecosystem, is all around educating people, essentially.
Wow, that's a cool journey. That's a cool way to say it. Do you want to introduce yourself as well, Heidi?
Yeah, sure. I'm Heidi. I have a background in anthropology, which is sort of how I got in touch with Mark. He also has one. And I actually kind of fell into the innovation space by accident. I'm from New Zealand. I've been over this side of the world now for about 4 years, on and off. And yeah, I got in touch with Mark because I was doing research on entrepreneurship, which is how people kind of move within companies outside of their daily job and their push to innovate. And I really wanted to know what motivated people to do that, and stories is something that I looked for a lot.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you've joined up forces with Mark. So I mean,
I started doing research with Mark.
I want to say kind of how we started together, which was innovation ecosystem. But I think you're pivoting off of that first set of product into another set, so we can talk about that today as well. I mean, where we first met was doing a podcast, just like today. And Mark and I had both started doing that at the same time, but in a completely different way. Your approach was getting very credible senior people from organizations to talk about their journey of innovating.
Yeah.
And my approach has been interviewing more startups and in the finance vertical where I am and talking about the technologies behind it. So a very different approach to something similar. Can you talk about creating an audience and how innovation ecosystem got started?
Yeah. Well, so as I said, I came out of the corporate world, and a couple of things were very clear to me. Firstly, the bigger your company, the smaller your world. So I came out and thought, well, what do I want to do with the second half of my life? I had some ideas, but I was kind of done with the corporate world. 20 years being innovative, being an innovator. So I figured out, well, a podcast, this new technology, and I probably didn't know what the word podcast was, 15 months ago, 18 months ago. But so I thought this is a great way of reaching people. And I decided, let's get hold of all the resources that I use, the kinds of people, the technologies I used when I was innovating in Syngenta, and make them available to other people who are in similar roles in organizations. And so I went down the podcast route, as you say, hugely grateful to be able to attract some really big names. So, thought leaders, world-published world-renowned thought leaders in areas of innovation, entrepreneurship, influence, productivity, CEOs, executives who are actually doing this work, heads of research and development for some pretty big companies, a number of whom are based here in Switzerland. And then the third group is this group of high performers in sport or in the arts or in mountaineering or exploration.
So
outliers, yeah. But all of whom have got a unique perspective on change, on leadership, and on innovation, and that's the lens that we look at. So what's happened is, it's addressed for people like me, people like you, trying to do this work in large, mature organisations. Many of these companies are beginning to go ex-growth. Here we sit in Switzerland. But
what does ex-growth mean?
Well, it means that basically the expectations of 6, 8, 10% a year revenue growth, either from new products or from new markets, they're disappearing. You can't do that anymore.
In banking, that's definitely the case.
Banking is the
Growth
case,
gone.
same in agriculture, same in food, same in automotive. I mean, there are a lot of industries that are actually suffering now. And some of them are waking up more quickly than others. But here in Switzerland, you've got Nestle, it's the largest food company in the world, 151 years old today. It's ex-growth. I mean, they are struggling. They can't rely on emerging markets. They can't rely on new technologies, new products, because consumers are changing, regulatory environment's changing. So the world is actually looking very difficult for a lot of these companies.
But this was our big difference, and why I was attracted to get on your show, so to speak, is because you were thinking across industries, and you had different questions for me that helped me understand that I actually was generating value to my industry differently, and I saw myself on a different level after. So can you talk about that cross-industry? How did you get such a network built up to build this innovation?
Well, I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, there were a few people, as I said, who I actually brought in while I was at Syngenta to work with me and my team. So there were people, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, David Allen, the productivity guru, a guy called Scott Pelton from Tignum, which is he's a corporate athlete sort of coach. A number of the books, that I've read, like Alex Osterwalder, who wrote he's down the road in Lausanne, who wrote the book, definitive book, Business Model Canvas. I've done some work with him. So
huge plug for that. This lab that you see around me is
Absolutely.
all based on Alex Osterwalder's methodology and the scientific method from places like Syngenta, X, Novartis.
So that canvas is a hugely valuable tool, and anyone doing this kind of work needs the canvas. I'd say they also need David Allen's book. They need Getting Things Done. They need to be able to figure out how to be more productive in this world, because you turn on your email. By the time we finish this interview, we'll each have 100 emails probably backed up. So how do you manage that? So the tools that I use that I knew actually worked in the trenches, and then on top of that, I reached out to a handful of people. Some of whom, I'd read, like Robert Cialdini, for instance. I mean, the guy who wrote the definitive book on influence on the planet. Probably the number one book you need to read if you're in marketing.
But you've had credible guests.
Yeah.
And they all have these different skill sets, which is what I think made it successful. I mean, I define your show, your podcast, as successful because it's getting downloaded, people are listening to your content, and it's for free.
Yeah.
But when I look in the finance industry, right, so the leaders in my space are definitely Brett King, Chris Skinner, David Breer. You guys have done an amazing job at creating podcasts because you were on it some years ahead, but now some of us are opening up and saying, what do we do for open innovation as well, which is why we're doing shows now as well. But we've kind of been following those leads. Where do you take innovation ecosystems? So you had this mass of people and you generated this audience and this massive content. It's like you put water behind the dam. What do you do now?
Well, first thing I did was I hired Heidi. I mean, Heidi is going to help repurpose this content. We've got an enormous amount of content, which I think when we look across the content, we can actually make it available to our guests in a different format. So we're looking at that. But then I think the second thing is that we reached out to the ecosystem of listeners, and you say we've been lucky. We've had quite significant growth on an ongoing basis. I mean, we're nowhere near the kind of consumer Tim Ferriss level numbers, but we know that most of our listeners are executives or leaders or entrepreneurs in large organizations, or kind of ones that I mentioned. And we reached out to them, and they came back and said, we want to participate in the ecosystem. We want access to you, not just me, but the people who are around me, and also some of the guests. So
Can we pause on how important that is? You don't have to have a podcast with 3 to 5 million listeners to be successful necessarily and monetize your business. I think that's the first big lesson for me, because we're dealing with a clientele that basically controls industry, the captains of industry, or the talented people within industry who drive the change there. And they have access to the budgets and the authority to change things, right?
Yeah. Well, they also have an enormous need. I mean, I think the reason it's been successful is because what we talk about resonates with lots of people in running businesses, running teams, running functions in mature organizations. And so we reached out to them. They said, we want more access. We want to get into conversation with you. We've got problems. How can you help us? And I've consulted in the past, but I've got no ambition to go back into consulting.
No,
so,
God, no.
It's
sorry for the consultants watching, but I've done it, and I never want to go back there. It's like a dark chapter that I closed.
But I mean, having said that, I mean, there are different models for generating, for helping organizations actually solve these problems. So we've launched, and you know this because you helped me, host the first event. We launched together with the chairman, who's founder of Wired magazine way back when in the mid-90s, we launched a program called the Innovation Leadership Circle. And we're now rolling this out around the world, actually. We've got 8 programs this year. A number of them,
programs
8 programs this year.
Wow.
And we got cohorts of 8 people for each program. And we've had people from companies like UBS, from companies like Novartis, like Syngenta, like Roche. So agribusiness, pharma, banking, consumer, some other, some more, again, mostly from industrialized companies.
Very handheld, bespoke work.
Absolutely.
This is not a Tony Robbins, 1,000 people in a stadium, each paying X thousand francs to be there. This is very close groups.
Well,
right?
so these people, I mean, they run big businesses, they got big budgets, but they value a couple of things. They value the space that we can create and the community we can create where they can actually engage with like-minded people who are facing similar issues. So people like me, who did this kind of work in the past, they like to know they're not alone, first of all. Secondly, they want access to best resources that we can pull together that actually help them with their problems, right? And so we bring together around this community, around these 8 individuals, we put a community of people together who've got experience. Folks, I mean, you were one of these coaches, but we've also got, someone who ran innovation for a big business unit for Nestle. Mm-hmm. We've got our chairman, Ian Charles Stewart, who founded Wired magazine. Since then, he's been involved in...
We'll tag his LinkedIn here.
Yeah, since then, he's an amazing guy. Since then, he's been involved in 34 startups, and this is his latest one, Innovation Ecosystem. We've got others who've got similar levels of experience. So the group enjoys the conversation and being part of this ecosystem. And then we have a program, or a process I should say, which we're calling ecosystem learning, which actually takes them on a journey that helps them accelerate their innovation agenda. So it's a 100-day program, or it lasts for 100 days, helping people accelerate their innovation agenda.
Can I talk about my own experience here? This "you are not alone" thing of the aliens in the universe is so important to me.
Yeah.
What I found trying to do innovation within the finance industry was that most of the great contacts that I made and the inspirations I took were then from outside the finance industry, funnily enough. From people from automotive industries, from artificial intelligence, from technologies, from new things.
Yeah.
Because they gave me confidence to introduce new things to banking that hadn't been thought of in banking yet. And I think that the way of doing it smaller scale makes sense because I'm intimidated when you're in front of 300 people.
Yeah.
You can't really talk about what's really on your mind, right?
Absolutely. So you're right, and that's what happens is that we've got people who are, I mean, there's one guy who was ex-consultant, ex-partner of McKinsey, now runs a company of 4,000 people. And there are significant, it's a fantastic, successful business. He was in the first group. And he took a huge amount out of it because he was able to learn from other people in other industries and take those learnings and apply them to his situation. So it's a very, very powerful methodology.
One other thing that struck me about it was the diversity in the room, which is unusual. Mm-hmm. In finance, it tends to be 50-year-old plus males. I shouldn't insult us both, but basically, I saw a very diverse group that was very open about their emotions as well. So they were talking not just about blocked at my company from trying to change the following, but actually things they had done and emotional stories, and I found it powerful, the first ILC group.
It is powerful. I mean, I think, partly because of the process that we use to actually build the trust, and, we selected these individuals very, very carefully. They were hand-selected because we want to make sure that the space that we're creating is appropriate for them. And then I think the second thing is, most of these challenges ultimately are leadership challenges. Individuals are called forward to change how they lead in order to create this kind of innovation. And it's not about the business model canvas. It's actually about how you show up as a leader. So as a leader, do you, I use this language quite a lot. Do you take up space or do you create space as a leader? Most leaders take up space. Most leaders run meetings, minute by minute. Here's the agenda. That doesn't create any kind of space for innovation. And I think to your other point around diversity, I mean, one of the huge themes across the first 35 or 40 of our podcasts is we ask the question, what do you do to remain innovative, of all our guests? And the vast majority of them say it's about diversity. We've had one guest who visited
point of view as well as personal.
Well, exactly.
Right? So allowing for diverse.
But more than that, actually, Dave, it's actually doing things in their lives that make them uncomfortable, but which actually expose them to different things. So one guest spent a week at a different place of worship for a full year. So she visited 52 different places of worship for a year to expose herself to completely different inputs and ways of thinking, rather like you say in the financial services world, you're drawing from this industry or drawing from this industry. So diversity is a huge element, not just by gender and age.
That's a very drastic example. People are also talking about just going traveling or just talking to their children, just kind of talking to different age groups and talking to different cultures and exposing themselves to diversity in any way that they could help them be more creative.
So
could help them
outside in
see things
inputs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean that language outside in is what the program says. I mean, it's designed outside in, peer-to-peer collaborative learning is what the program is all about. And as you say, I mean, it's a very powerful experience for participants, and it taps into a huge need at the moment in the marketplace.
But I want to pause on something. You said it 3 times, backwards and forwards, and creating space in an organization. For me that meant, and in my episode with you, we talked about the following thing: aggressive, creating offense options, going on the attack, attacking other
SEAL
vertical
teams
industries,
you talked about,
SEAL teams, creating diversity in my own team, things that I don't know, backing myself up with people who actually do know how to do different things that I can't do. And for me, as an ex-hockey player for 13 years, and a couple of my friends are strength training and hockey coaches, it's all about creating the 20 centimeters on either side of you in front of the net to actually get the puck fed to you and take a shot on net.
Yep.
So senior leaders somehow tend to do that in an organization. They box out and they create just enough room that they can move, right?
Yep.
How does this Innovation Leadership Circle train people up on that?
Well, I mean, what we do is we give access to specific methodologies. So actually the first event, we gave everyone a copy of a book called Why Simple Wins, which is by my first guest on the show, Lisa Bedell. Her new book, Why Simple Wins. I mean, it's a fantastic read. And one of the participants took this book and started reading it on the train home and read the first chapter and ordered 15 copies for his management team that moment, because basically it just takes you through a very simple process of how do you actually create space in your life as an individual, then as a team leader, what do you actually do to create space for your team to think differently, and then at an organizational level, what do you do to actually create the space to adapt and to begin to build the muscle of innovation and make it sustainable. Because at the end of the day, I mean, what's happening, Dave? I mean, you know this better than anyone else. The core businesses, research and development engines, are spluttering. If not, they're dead now. I mean, I'm talking pharma, I'm talking agribusiness, I'm talking the financial services. These businesses are in trouble.
Well, in pharma, since 20 years, they bought their innovation through that other industry, biotech.
Yeah.
And in finance, we now call it fintech.
Absolutely.
So we built a whole other industry who does our R&D for us, and then we go buy it when it's ripe enough.
But pharma still spends like $170 billion a year on basic R&D.
On their own R&D.
Yeah. So I mean, they're not getting the returns any longer. And so as a result of that, it's so important to actually create some, alternative options. And so the hypothesis here, which is why Heidi, being an anthropologist, me an anthropologist, this is all about culture. This is about creating cultural, cultures of innovation in large organizations, because that's the only way these companies are going to survive, to be honest, in the long term. Now, they might get lucky, they might be able to buy companies, they might discover a new drug, they might discover come up with new technology, a new business model, but none of these things are sustainable. The only truly sustainable source of innovation comes from your culture.
So talk about this. It's like the start of a bad joke, right? 2 anthropologists and an ex-hockey player get in a room and try to create a culture of innovation. What bad stuff can happen from that, right? You said 100 days.
Yeah.
What can you do in 100 days? Like new presidents, for example. We'll do with the cliche Trump tag on this, right? Why is 100 days important for people?
Well,
It's trust. It's building trust, building relationships, and then building that circle for exchange. And I think that does require trust.
Yeah.
And you need that 100 days for that.
To build up proper trust. So
Build
it's not like
trust
2
in
days.
each other,
Like,
to be really honest and raw about the stories and the experiences that you're having, and understanding what kind of solutions can help. Really digging into the problem. Like, we talk a lot about the problem space and nailing down the actual problem, because people can dance around it, like we were saying, the difference between British and Americans.
Yeah.
People dance around what the actual problem is, and it takes time to kind of drill down.
Yeah, so that's why you need the diversity, right? We talked about just pre-episode. Heidi and I were chatting about, she's Kiwi, New Zealand, but still British English, and I'm American English. So we tend to say things in 3 words that you take 400 words for, but both are needed, right? Because if everybody just says 3 words, nothing gets done. And if everybody says 400 words all the time, nothing gets done. So it's somehow mixing the cultures, right?
I mean, the other thing about 90 days is that as a leader, if you're leading a global organization or a global function, there's only so much you can do. There's a rhythm of how frequently you bring your team together. So 90 days gives you a chance to learn stuff and put it into action, then come back and report and get feedback from the coaches and from the team, and then go and adapt it. So 90 days, 100 days is a good time because it's not a year and it's not a week. It's somewhere in between. So what we're finding is that the results you can achieve, most people underestimate they overestimate what you can achieve in the short term and underestimate what you can achieve in the long term.
Well,
That's a fact of life, essentially.
The reason I asked Mark and Heidi to come by today and actually take this episode, it's a special one to me because I haven't seen this done before. What I see is a lot of fintechy things. We can revolutionize and change banking, and frankly, fintech has not yet changed banking. As much as we want to tag blockchain, I'm sorry, it's 5 to 7 years off commercial viability for our industry, right? And in the outside finance industry, everybody has the same. I've worked in pharma, I've worked in other industries, the insurance industry before, and what I think is that there's this massive greenfield out there for doing corporate innovation. I've just battled for 3.5 years to create space in my organization to start to do it, and it's been such a battle that I got bags under my eyes and gray hair out of it. Yeah. And I don't want everyone to have that same experience, and you did the same thing.
Well, that's exactly why I created the podcast in the first place, because it is painful, it is hard work, and I didn't want people to go through the same experience. There's an easier way, and you can accelerate this learning. You can get more results more quickly, and limit the pain that the scars on your back, right, which you didn't mention as well. But I guess you've got some of this too. So that's what this is all about. It's in service of people like us who are in large organisations wrestling with how to actually make a difference. I've made piles of mistakes in my career, but I've also figured out a few things that actually work, and I want to bring those in, and that's really what the circle is all about.
A massive pile of scars and mistakes, but also a couple of key, molecules that were the whole difference, the catalyst.
Yeah.
What did you want to say?
There's another reason why it's 100 days, and it's a little bit more practical, but the people that we have in the Innovation Leadership Circle, they're super busy. They're doing what you say. They're spending days, like 12 hours in the office. So we kind of wanted to design a program that doesn't mean that they have to be doing 7 hours a week of work on it. We wanted to design something where they could actually put it into their busy schedule.
But also not a MOOC, massive open online community,
No,
right? So it's still
exactly.
bespoke, so they feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and it's half, mostly virtual as well, so you can just do it wherever you are, and I think that's one of the huge benefits for these people. We try to look at what problems they have and what kind of availability they have and design a program specifically for them.
So what should people actually do if they want to get involved with building up these next, 7 more things coming this year, right? We're putting the materials together, but you can go to our website, www.innovationecosystem.com/ILC. That was a mouthful, we'll tag it.
Yeah, we'll tag it. And then get in touch. And if you like what you see, it isn't for everyone. You need an aggressive innovation agenda. Number one, you need to be willing to engage in this kind of process. So you need to be reasonably innovative about how you do your innovation. But we've got
And you need some level of authority. When I look at that first group that we had, they were all very senior people, actually. There was no jokers in there.
No. This is which is why the innovation agenda is so important. There needs to be energy around that.
Motivation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bring motivation.
But I think the other piece is if you one of the big benefits is the group that we put around these participants is world class. There are some really fascinating people, and we're going to continue to build those people out to come and support this group and help them understand what innovation actually could look like in other industries. So people who've done it before. So it's all about you're not alone. Getting people in a room who've got similar issues, albeit in different industries, different levels of experience, and have a look at the site and then contact
game this year,
absolutely.
not in 3 years.
No, absolutely. Well,
game.
within 90 days or within 100 days, essentially.
Yeah. Well, we've been there. We've done it. We've got the scars to prove it.
Yep,
So
yep.
hopefully we get something good here launched. I want to see this thing grow, and also the Innovation Ecosystem podcast is still going, right? So people can have a listen.
Well, Heidi, you
we're
can say.
launching season 3 at the moment, actually today. I said that. It's going really well. We have an exciting season in store. I'm really excited. I've read all the transcripts.
So in iTunes and SoundCloud, people can look up Innovation Ecosystem and
absolutely
get there. There's a bunch of
also
innovation
follow us
podcasts.
on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
We'll tag it all.
We do all the updates there.
There's a bunch of innovation podcasts, but what I find is that some of them are so mass retail that I couldn't get value out of them, and that's why I ended up with things like FinTech Insiders for me in my vertical. But I think the one that I've seen that actually I listen to is yours. So If you listen to most Silicon Valley guys, they only listen to 1 or 2 podcasts. I also listen to the Andreessen one. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. But I think it's worth pointing out. I mean, that part of the market. I mean, there's so much stuff on innovation in Silicon Valley. We're not talking about that. We're talking about innovation in the heartland of the American and the European and the global economy. These are companies that have been around a long time. And what we want to do is make sure that we give them access to the resources to ensure they continue to be around for a long time. But these companies are creaking. They're struggling, and our experience has been, we know what makes a difference from our personal experience doing this kind of work, and we want to make that available to people who are in similar situations in similar companies.
All right, so to wrap up, thank you for listening. Mark Bidwell, Heidi Ashby, launching Innovation Leadership Circle out of Innovation Ecosystem. I love corporate innovation, and I think it's actually the big growth spot outside of startups, which is sort of 5% or less of the economy.
Yep.
Most of the economy turns around corporations. That's how we set up society in the last 200 years after industrialization, so I'm a big believer in this. So thanks for listening and watching, and please check it out, what Mark talked about.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So let's take some questions. I like questions. What do you guys got?